700,000 people. That's how many more people have left London than moved in since 2020. Not over a decade, not across a generation, in 5 years. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire population of Sheffield. Gone. And we're not talking about a one-off pandemic blip. This isn't people fleeing to the countryside for 6 months and then coming back. The data shows sustained, year-on-year net outflows. People leaving and not returning. And here's what makes it more significant. It's not random. It's not evenly distributed across age groups and income brackets. There's a pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The people leaving London are disproportionately young. Under 35s, early career professionals, couples thinking about starting families, the exact demographic that every major city needs to stay economically and culturally relevant. The people who should be building their lives here are choosing, actively choosing, to build them somewhere else. Where are they going? Manchester's seen the biggest gains, then Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Edinburgh. Cities with lower costs, improving infrastructure and, critically, growing job markets that no longer require you to be physically present in a London office 5 days a week. Some are leaving the country entirely. Lisbon, Barcelona, Dubai, places where your money stretches further and the quality of life equation actually balances. Now you might be thinking, London's always had churn. People move in, people move out. That's how cities work. And you'd be right. London has always had internal migration. But what's different now is the direction. For decades, the flow was net positive. More people coming in than going out. London was a magnet. The place you move to, not from. That's reversed. And it's not just about raw numbers. It's about who those numbers represent. When a city loses its young professionals, it doesn't just lose tax revenue. It loses energy. It loses innovation. It loses the people who open new restaurants, start new businesses, create new culture. What you're left with is a city that's older, wealthier at the top, and increasingly hollowed out in the middle. This isn't speculation. This is ONS data. This is what the numbers are actually showing us, quarter after quarter, year after year. So the question isn't whether London's population is declining. It is. The question is why, and whether there's any realistic scenario where it reverses. To answer that, we need to look at something most people avoid talking about honestly, the money. Before we get into the numbers, if you're finding this useful, consider subscribing. I make videos about the economics of living in Britain. No hype, no clickbait, just honest analysis of what's actually happening and what it means for your life. Alright, let's talk money. Let's do some actual maths, not vibes, not London's expensive, real numbers. Take a one-bedroom flat. In London, as of early 2026, you're looking at around £2,150 a month. That's the average. In zones 1 to 3, where most jobs actually are, it's higher. In Manchester, a comparable one-bed is roughly £1,100. That's a difference of over £1,000 a month, just on rent. But rent's only part of it. Transport in London is now officially the most expensive metro system in the world. The daily cap for zones 1 to 3 is £10.50. If you're commuting 5 days a week, that's over £200 a month. In Manchester, a monthly bus and tram pass is around £90. So you're saving another £110 there. Then there's council tax, utilities, the general cost of going outside, a pint, a coffee, a meal out. Across the board, Manchester is roughly 40% cheaper than London for day-to-day living costs. That's not a guess. That's data from Expatistan and Numbeo, updated late 2025. When you add it all up, a single professional living a pretty normal life in London, rent, transport, bills, food, occasional social life, is spending somewhere in the region of £36,000 a year just to exist. In Manchester, the same lifestyle costs closer to £21,000. That's a £15,000 difference every year. Now here's where it gets interesting. The median salary in London is around £47,500. In the northwest, it's closer to £35,000. So yes, London pays more. But that £12,500 salary premium doesn't cover the £15,000 cost premium. You're actually worse off, financially, earning more money in London than earning less in Manchester. Let that sit for a moment. For decades, the deal was Move to London, earn more, get ahead. That was the trade-off. You accepted the higher costs because the higher wages compensated, and then some. That equation has broken. The wage premium hasn't kept pace with the cost premium, and in many industries, thanks to remote and hybrid work, the wage premium is shrinking anyway. If your company lets you work from anywhere, why would they pay you London rates to live in London? Some still do, but increasingly they don't. What this means in practice is that someone earning £38,000 in Manchester and paying £1,100 rent has more disposable income than someone earning £50,000 in London and paying £2,200. They can save more, they can invest more, they can actually build something. And people have noticed. This isn't just about affording a nicer flat. It's about the maths of building a life. Saving for a deposit, starting a family, having options. In London, for most people under 40, those things feel increasingly theoretical. In Manchester, Bristol, Leeds, they feel possible. The numbers don't lie. And once you see them clearly, the question stops being, can I afford to leave London? And starts being, can I afford not to? But money's only half the story. Because something else changed in 2020 that made all of this possible. The city extracted a toll, but it also provided a path. If you wanted to work in finance, you moved to London. Media? London. Law, advertising, tech, consulting, London. The jobs were there. The clients were there. The opportunities were there. And crucially, the expectation was that you'd be there too, physically. Then the world locked down. And something broke. Not temporarily, structurally. Within weeks, entire industries discovered that remote work worked. That you didn't actually need everyone in the same building to get things done. That Zoom calls and Slack channels and cloud collaboration could replace, or at least supplement, physical presence. And once that genie was out of the bottle, it wasn't going back in. Yes, there's been a push for return to office. Yes, some companies have mandated 3 days a week, 4 days, even 5. But the data tells a different story. Remote work didn't eliminate that access. It democratized it. And for many roles, full remote is now standard. This changed everything. Because if you only need to be in London 2 days a week, suddenly living an hour away on a fast train makes sense. If you only need to be there once a month, living in Bristol or Edinburgh or Lisbon makes sense. And if you never need to be there at all, why pay London prices? The city's entire value proposition was built on access. Access to employers, access to networks, not with the romance of possibility, but with the clarity of experience. But it's not just about work. Something else happened during those lockdowns. People had time, forced time, to actually think about their lives, to notice things they'd been too busy commuting to notice, like the fact that their flat was tiny, that they hadn't seen greenery in weeks, that their commute had been stealing 90 minutes of their life every single day. When the world opened back up, a lot of people looked at London differently. They'd seen what life could feel like without the crush, without the crowds, without the constant grinding expense. And many decided they didn't want to go back. There's something else too. Something harder to quantify but impossible to ignore. London used to be where culture happened, where artists and musicians and writers could, just about, afford to live while they built something. That's gone. The creative class has been priced out. What's left is increasingly corporate, increasingly sanitized, increasingly less. The city that people move to in their 20s to find themselves has become a city that only makes sense if you've already found yourself, and found a 6-figure salary to go with it. So who's actually left? The exodus isn't random. There's a pattern, and it tells you everything about what London is becoming. The people leaving are disproportionately under 35. Early and mid-career professionals. People with options but not yet roots. They're renters, mostly. Mobile, adaptable. The kind of people who moved to London for opportunity and are now realizing that opportunity has moved on without them. Families are leaving too. Couples who did the maths on raising kids in a 2-bed flat versus a 3-bed house with a garden somewhere else. Who looked at childcare costs, school catchments, the sheer logistics of family life in a city that wasn't designed for it, and made a rational decision. Remote workers are leaving, obviously. If your job doesn't require you to be in London, and your salary doesn't depend on it, then every month you stay is a choice to pay a premium for what exactly? proximity to an office you visit twice a month. So who's staying? The ultra-wealthy for a start. London still works brilliantly if you're rich. The restaurants, the culture, the convenience, it's all there if you can afford it. A 4-bedroom house in Chelsea isn't competing with a 4-bedroom house in Didsbury. Different market, different planet. Then there's the older generation. People who bought property 20, 30 years ago. Who've seen their homes increase in value by 500%. Who have no mortgage, low costs and deep roots. For them, London isn't expensive, it's home, and it's made them wealthy. And then there's a third group, the trapped. People who can't afford to leave. Who are stuck in rental cycles, spending so much on rent that they can't save a deposit. Who would move if they could? But the maths doesn't work in the other direction either. They're not staying because London works for them. They're staying because they haven't figured out how to escape. What you end up with is a 2-tier city. The very rich at the top, the stuck at the bottom, and a hollowing out of everything in between. The middle class, the teachers, nurses, junior solicitors, mid-level managers, the people who actually make a city function, they're the ones leaving. And when they go, they take something with them. Not just tax revenue and economic activity, but the social fabric that makes a place livable. London is becoming a city of extremes, and the people who built their lives on the assumption that it would always be the centre of everything are waking up to a different reality. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question. London in 2026 is not the London your parents moved to. It's not the city of opportunity that pulled in generations of ambitious 20-somethings with the promise that hard work would eventually pay off. That contract has been broken. The numbers don't add up anymore. The wage premium doesn't cover the cost premium. The career advantages have been eroded by remote work. The quality of life equation has flipped. 700,000 people have already worked this out. They've done the maths, they've weighed the options, and they've decided that what London offers isn't worth what London costs. Not anymore. And here's what's striking. These aren't people who failed in London. They're not leaving because they couldn't hack it. Many of them are leaving precisely because they could. They had the careers, the salaries, the trajectory, and they still chose to go. Because success in London increasingly means working harder to stand still, earning more just to afford less, climbing a ladder that keeps getting taller while the rungs get further apart. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from living somewhere that demands everything and offers diminishing returns. It's not dramatic, it's not a breakdown, it's quieter than that. It's looking at your bank balance after a decent payday and wondering where it all went. It's realizing you've lived in the same city for 8 years and still can't picture buying a home here. It's watching friends leave, one by one, and noticing that their lives seem to open up in ways yours hasn't. That slow accumulation of doubt, that's what's driving this. This isn't about London failing. Cities don't fail. They evolve, they change, they become something else. And London is becoming something else. A global financial centre, a playground for the wealthy, a place that works beautifully for a small slice of people and barely works at all for everyone else. Meanwhile, everywhere else is catching up. Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Edinburgh. These cities have jobs now. They have culture. They have infrastructure that's actually improving. And they have something London increasingly can't offer. A realistic path to building a life. A deposit that's achievable. Rent that doesn't consume half your income. Space to breathe. The question isn't whether London is dying. It's not. It will continue to be one of the most important cities in the world. The question is whether that importance translates into a good life for you, specifically. Whether the version of London that exists today, not the one in your head from 10 years ago, is a place where your future makes sense. Because here's the truth, most people avoid saying out loud. For the majority of young professionals in this country, staying in London is no longer the ambitious choice. It's the default choice, the path of least resistance, the thing you do because you haven't stopped to ask whether you should. 700,000 people stopped and asked. They looked at the numbers. They looked at their lives. They made a decision. Maybe it's time you did too.